Okay, Brent,
Okay, Josh.
this is Speak Now or Whatever. This is our interview with Jeff Bettger, the singer of 90 Pound Wuss, who you and I have been a fan of for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And this was our very first interview.
Yes. Yeah, this was actually recorded back in February.
That's right. Was it February?
It was February.
Jeez Louise. Yes, so we met Jeff after he played at Furnace Fest.
That's right.
And then contacted us. We talked to him and told him we were doing this podcast, and he was our very first interview for this thing. So basically, we do things backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly right.
We start the podcast, and then we put as our second episode the first interview we ever did.
Yep.
Right. And so in this interview, we talked to Jeff about 90 Pound Wuss. We talked to him about Raft of Dead Monkeys, another project he's in. We talked to him about Dry Bones, another project he started, like a noise project, and about his time in Seattle and about his history in the music business.
Yeah, and also just kind of stories about his touring experience. They didn't tour often. But
Exactly.
some of those stories are great. And they also intertwine with people that we already know as well, with also Tooth and Nail and some other friends that we know from the Seattle area.
That's right. And Jeff had very nice things to say about Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes, he did. He actually watched our band play.
He watched our
At
band
Furnace
play.
Fest.
We talk about that too.
Yeah.
So this is our interview with Jeff Bettger, the 90 Pound Wuss. We had this discussion earlier. Because we have known your band for so long, we tried to remember if we'd ever seen you play live. And I have never seen you play live, even though I've been a fan of your band since 97
Oh, wow.
and still hadn't seen you play live. And you said the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing you play live, even though I believe you probably played here in Birmingham with other bands that we knew about. I don't think that we ever saw you play live.
I'm pretty sure we did MXPX. Pretty sure I remember playing in Birmingham with MX. I don't know if we did. The only real national tours that 90 Pound Wuss did was an MXPX tour, and then we did a tour with who was it? MXPX and Slick Shoes and us, and then we did one that was Goatee Hook and Value Pack and us, and then we did another national tour that was just our tour for the third record. So we only did 3 national tours. The other bands I was in only did West Coast tours. So it was really difficult touring back then, but I know it was even more difficult even before that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't imagine, man. Yeah. I mean, just seeing bands that are still touring in these vans and stuff these days, I'm like, how do you guys even still do this? I'm like, I have to have my creature comforts.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. It was interesting that we were even able to do the festival. I mean, those guys wanted us to come and we were able to make it work, and I'm thankful that we had that. I don't know what the future holds for 90 Pound Wuss, but I like that we got to do that at least.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a lot of fun to see you guys, because I actually saw you guys at the pre-show as well at Trim Tab.
Cool.
Brewing. And so that was a lot of fun. But yeah,
so
man,
you got to see all the songs that we learned for that from last year. That was all the songs we knew how to play. We played between the sets. We played some crossover, but we played we had like an hour's worth of music that we could play. Nothing else. If anybody would have asked us to play anything else, we couldn't have done it.
Oh, geez.
That's awesome.
Well, so when you came and played Furnace Fest, so when was the last time that 90 Pound Wuss played?
That would have been in either late 1999 or early 2000.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So it was a long time. Yeah,
For real. Well,
for
then there were
real.
so many, yeah, so many people there though at that Furnace Fest that for sure was happy to see you.
Yeah, there seems like there's at least a few hundred people that follow music that I make. But you know, it's different. The whole industry is different. So I put out a album last year too of this band called Dry Bones,
Yes.
DRYBNZ.
Yes.
And I don't know if many people have heard it. I have a stack of records still here. So it was fun. It's kind of a noise project, but it's a lot different than it used to be. And 90 Pound Wuss was kind of spoiled. That was the first band I was in that put out albums and toured, and we got right into it with like good studios and budgets. So it's a lot different nowadays. And I'm so used to sort of even then like having those like uh more like people sort of working on everything
Mhm.
that I feel I was too spoiled early on and should have in some ways I wish I would have done sort of the DIY things that I did later or now more than I did before 90 Pound Wuss, so that I would have been more prepared, because I think a lot of that had you get thrown into a scenario and suddenly you're in your early 20s touring the country, opening up for MX as they're blowing up, and like you think things are going to be different, and it was really hard to sustain that momentum when especially, I mean, we changed so dramatically from album to album that I think people really didn't know what to think of. Like by the time we did, in my opinion, our best album, which was our last one, it's called Shorthand Operation.
Yes.
We had a different sound that later got, we were probably like, besides the fast skate punk kind of drum beats, it wasn't that dissimilar to like Interpol and Yeah Yeah Yeahs and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But we were just before that, and we still incorporated some of that, like at least as far as the drums went, and some of the guitar riffs, like a little bit more of the like no effects propaganda kind of things going on
Yes.
still, even though we opened it up to have that sort of post-punk Joy Division kind of thing going on sometimes. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit, I think it was a little bit too early, and also not enough sort of straightforward. We incorporated so many different things that it was a rough time. We got a lot of blowback from fans of both the previous records, but most of the people who liked the second record a lot ended up liking the third record too. And
Yeah,
then I
yeah, yeah.
think over time it kind of aged a little bit better for some people as they got older and like heard it again, thinking, oh, I didn't realize this was actually a good record, because when they first heard it they were younger and wanted the screaming and more pop punk sing along stuff. um and we just love music, so we've always all the bands that I've been in always kind of just do whatever the heck we want to do when we do it.
Exactly. What's cool is when you listen to the very first one, you know, it's interesting because I kind of feel like when you listen to that first record, you know your influences. Like you can hear the influences right away. You can hear Dead Kennedys, you can hear Minor Threat. But what's interesting is in that first record, it's almost like it's Minor Threat, and then you go to the second one, there's a little bit of change, and then by the time you get to Shorthand Operation, it's full blown Fugazi.
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I felt that when I listened to it.
There's definitely some of that too in the second record for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean we were when we started the band, we were listening to all that stuff. And even before we started the band, me and Marty went to high school together, and so did the original bass player. And but Marty and I were pretty into like everything, like goth, punk, hardcore,
Mhm.
even the Beastie Boys a lot. Like we kind of liked all of it. And I kind of like me and Marty and my partner Teresa, we all played in like this band in high school that was more of a goth band called Systematic, and it was kind of more like industrial goth, um, with some punk stuff going on, but more punk in the vein of like Big Black or like some of the more like Midwest kind of strange out there punk stuff. And then yeah, I mean we just listen to all kinds of music. I mean, I still do. I like everything, probably every genre, but there's a few I'm less versed in and less influenced by. But I can find a band in almost every genre that I will appreciate and like.
That's
Um,
really cool.
yeah, it's always
Probably like
kind of been
the
that
thing that
way.
you're doing now, especially with Dry Bones. I listened to a little bit of that, and it sounds like it's definitely more experimental than some of that previous stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot noisier. I think the Suffering in the Hideous Thieves records were more like kind of like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and maybe some Swans and like Low kind of.
Okay. Okay.
And then the Raft of Dead Monkeys stuff was more like at the time like Les Savy Fav was kind of big and I think it had those kind of influences, but I think Raft of Dead Monkeys was definitely more, the last record especially was way more like Fugazi-ish for sure. I mean, it was basically that last Raft of Dead Monkey. You can't really find it. I think it's on YouTube somewhere, but
Mhm.
it's the only full length that we ever really put out, that band. But it was basically 90 Pound Wuss and Roadside Monument. So that
Oh,
was essentially that record was very Doug heavy, but the first Raft of Dead Monkeys EP that we did was like more like blast beats and super fast, chaotic. I think Doug fully wrote one song on that EP, and then it was pretty much me. And then the other ones, it was kind of a cross between John Spalding, who was the 90 Pound Wuss guitar player on our last record, and half of the second record. He passed away from cancer in 2008, so that's why he wasn't playing this last time. And we got John Hammelberger back, and then added a second guitar player because Spalding's stuff was a little bit more out there and like I think we did it justice by having two guitar players. I think we were able to do a lot of that weird delays and like other things that John used to do live. So yeah, but he was in Raft of Dead Monkeys, and then it was Doug Lorig and Matt Johnson from Roadside Monument and me. That was Raft of Dead Monkeys. And
okay.
then Matt quit on our last record, and we got this guy Davey playing drums that was Doug's friend, and he was way like influenced by John Bonham, and you can totally hear he even played a Vista light. Like it was so funny. He had this red Vista light, and we just playing. He'd be doing the kind of fills, like just like so like Zeppelinish. And so that was way more like to me. That last record was, I mean, we were playing shows up here with like Pretty Girls Make Graves and stuff like that. So it was more like, that kind of thing, and very Fugazi influenced. But Doug Lorig songwriting from he was in Roadside and other bands after that. His current band's called Calm Collapse.
Mhm.
Um and he's his songwriting trademarks are all over that record. But the combo between the way him and John Spalding played guitar and Raft made this weird dynamic, sort of like when Guy and Ian play guitar together. There's something beautiful and strange and discordant and not quite right going on there that's pretty amazing. And I think that they had their own dynamic, and it worked out pretty interesting in that band with sort of the weird angular bass lines I put down, which are, essentially my biggest bass influences when I play bass are probably Simon Gallup from The Cure and obviously Peter Hook from Joy Division in New
Yeah,
Order.
yeah.
So the melodies and sort of that like aggressive kind of digging into it is what I like. Yeah, so I could definitely see there was always Fugazi was always listened to ever since, the first album came out, and we knew that Ian was in it. Even when we liked Minor Threat so much when we used to ride skateboards around, we were listening to Fugazi still. And I think we liked the first couple records the best at the time, but then they started putting out, I mean, we listened to all of them, but Yeah, over the years, I think like Red Medicine's probably one of my favorites. And I don't think it was back then. It was always repeater and 13 songs. But yeah,
That's
thanks.
cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. With Roadside Monument, were they up from PNW as well?
Yeah, they were from Seattle too. We all used to live together back then, and that's how. So I actually used to roadie for them because we were when 90 Pound Wuss was playing. Everybody was they all live like 2 hours from me, so they don't live in Seattle. I live in Seattle. We all grew up together on the Olympic Peninsula, a little town called Port Angeles, and things changed and people quit. And Marty was always in the band up until the last tour that we did. After we recorded Shorthand Operation, Marty then couldn't do it anymore. He had a few kids back then and uh responsibilities at home, and it was just too hard to drive over to rehearse, and we were always doing stuff. And so Matt Johnson from Roadside ended up playing drums, but we all lived together. So we had this we lived in this place right next door to like this famous Seattle music store called Trading Musician. That was just, that's where if you wanted a good vintage guitar, go to Trading Musician or something. And so we were right next door to that. Two of us lived upstairs and two of us lived downstairs, and pretty much yeah, we used to rent a rehearsal studio by the hour that had a PA system, and it had guitar amps and heads, so you just bring your chords and pedals and your guitar and could plug in. So we used to rent that when we'd practice. It was yeah, we just all lived together. And I used to, like I said, I used to roadie with Roadside sometimes, so we were always together. So it made sense that when after Roadside broke up, and then what happened was 90 Pound Wuss came back from our last tour we did. It was a US tour. It was really bad because we had said we don't want to do any of the like Christian rock shows that we were doing. We didn't want to do that at all anymore. And back then it was before, Under Oath kind of made it so that I don't think it mattered if you were a band of faith or whatever. And we were at the time, and had so there was a lot of like pushback, like the tour was booked by actually Ian Mackay's sister, Amanda, and she was we got connected with her through Frodis because we did a bunch of shows with them. I mean, they ended up being on Tooth and Nail. And so we were friends. She liked our music. She booked this tour, but she was having a hard time because we were on Tooth and Nail. And so it was rough getting shows. And even our roadie, he was in a pretty popular, like crusty out punk band called Behead the Prophet, No Lord Shall Live. And even he said like he connected us to some places that we played. Like we played a few like punk houses in it. I don't even remember where, but a few places that he had connections with, because we were having a hard time filling in the tour. And we did play Cornerstone that year. And that was sort of like okay, as long as we get to Cornerstone, we can sell some merch and we'll be able to get home. But our van broke down in Baltimore or somewhere close to Baltimore. And so we ended up at Conrad from Goaty Hook's house we overstayed our welcome trying to figure out how we were going to keep the tour, and had to cancel some shows. So we were there for probably 3 or 4 days, maybe even a week. Like it was way too long. And he definitely wasn't into having us there that long, and it was rough. And we were trying to figure out our options. In the end, we had the label. They were fortunate that they did this. They said we were trying to talk him into just having us fly home. Like, we're just going to cancel the tour and come home. Like, our van's broken. We don't have any money. They were like, no, if we help you get home, you're going to finish the tour. So we kept looking around, like, first buy a van, too much. We ended up convincing them to let us rent a Ryder truck. And we put, it was pretty crazy. We separated in the back. We put a sheet of plywood in the back, ratchet strapped to the sides, and all of our equipment and merch was behind it. And it was a Ryder truck with a like a canopy up above the, so if you went in the back, you could crawl up. We went to a secondhand store, put a futon mattress there, and it had the door between the cab and the back, so you could slide it open. And so the seats behind the cab, there was 2 bucket seats, and then behind that there was 2 seats on the side. But what we did was we got went to a secondhand store, bought a cheap couch, and put it on that side of the piece of plywood, and a futon mattress like up above. And so most of us hung out back there. It was totally illegal and dangerous. Don't ever do
course it
this.
is.
Yeah, it was. But somehow we'd open the door and blow the AC into the back of the cargo part of the van, and because it was so hot. I mean, this was summertime, and we were in the South and the East Coast, and it was burning up. And so we had made it all the way to Virginia, and then we ended up having to go down to Florida and back through and play Cornerstone Festival, and then get all the way back to the coast and back up. And that was all the stress, everything that happened on that tour was when we got back, basically, John had said, I don't want to be on Tooth and Nail anymore, and I don't want to be playing any of those shows. And he was under the impression that somebody else might sign us. So he was like saying we should start looking for another record label. And I'm like, no, we're kind of like, we won't be able to because of the name and Brandon and the affiliation with Tooth and Nail. So we're like, we liked this record. We were so proud of it and happy with it. And like, I wanted to play it more, but we had already sort of started Raft of Dead Monkeys. Originally, Raft of Dead Monkeys was all 3 of the members of Roadside Monument and me, and then Jonathan had quit and left, and so then I started playing bass. I don't remember how it happened. And then when we got back and started doing that band again, we hadn't recorded anything, and we only had like the 3 or 4 songs that I had sort of written, and then we were going to practice, and John's just kind of invited himself, and he was just in the band all of a sudden. And then Doug and Matt were like, what's John doing here? And I said, I don't know. He just asked if he could come. So he brought his stuff. And so suddenly like it was all 4 of us. Yeah. And then we just started doing that, and kind of, I told John, like Brandon asked me, he said that if I wanted to do 90 Pound Wuss, I could have whoever play on the records, and all I'd have to do is play some of the big festivals every year. But John really didn't want to be on Tooth and Nail. And so I was kind of loyal to John. And I said that, I mean, because I was the only original member back then, but I really liked what me and John and Marty had created on that last record. We wrote the record as a 3-piece and recorded it as a 3-piece, basically. And we just performed it live as a 4-piece. So we'd have different bass players come in. And then by the end, I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do it without Spalding, and he was totally just wanted to not have anything to do with Tooth and Nail. So we just did Raft of Dead Monkeys instead. It just kind of, that's how it happened. It was just kind of there.
Sure.
I feel like I've heard a very similar story in regards to bands that were with Tooth and Nail that were no longer with Tooth and Nail for certain issues or whatever. And so I'm actually surprised, like Tooth and Nail, was kind of the gateway for a lot of us into this kind of music. And I grew up, I'm definitely younger, but the guys that, like, my brother got me into a lot of this stuff, and you guys were the first band. Like, I don't know if you remember G-Rock. So
I do. Yes, it was
Watch
that video
G-Rock?
show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
they played our video on there, our one video. Yeah.
that's it.
That's what he's
That
talking
was
about.
the first time I'd ever heard you guys was on G-Rock, and I just fell in love because it was like skating and stuff going on, and it was like I loved that. And yeah, that was Girl Song, I think, right?
I think it was Something Must Break.
Oh, you're right.
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
That was the only video we really had. So but I think that they put the Girl Song, there was some skate video that used the Girl Song on it, and it could have been a G-Rock affiliated like skate thing that had that song on it. I do remember that. So it could have been that too. Totally.
Maybe so. we're always curious, especially one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is we're always curious as to the discovery of things and the stories behind how you got into something. And so what we're curious about is we know Seattle's history with music. We know Seattle's history with indie rock, punk rock, alternative rock, grunge, whatever you want to call it. But for you personally, what drew you to the music that you make? What drew you to punk rock around that time? Like the time that you got into it, or the time that 90 Pound Wuss started?
So, I mean, it kind of has a, obviously a little bit before, because 90 Pound Wuss was started after I graduated high school.
Oh, okay.
But it was still like right in that time frame. I think we probably started making music when maybe I was 20, and then I don't think we got signed till I was at 21, probably, maybe 22, but we were making music before that. And like punk rock happened in middle school when I was like maybe 7th grade. I discovered skateboarding and essentially punk rock at the same time, like a lot of people did.
Yes.
Because you'd open Thrasher magazine and it would have that review of records and stuff. And
Yep.
I think what happened for me was somebody my neighbor was into like whatever we called it, butt rock at the time. But she was into like Motley Crue and stuff like that, and so was her brother, who was my age at the same time.
They called
And
that
so
butt rock?
yeah, we called it butt rock. We used to call it butt rock. When we got into punk after that, we called it all like the glam stuff. We just called it butt rock for some reason. And then we ended up calling people that were into butt
That's a
rock,
new
we
one.
called
That's
them
a new one for me.
Hessians. Did you hear that one before? Hessians.
No.
We used to call people with long hair and that were into butt rock Hessians. But anyway, they so
I'm
they
learning a
got
lot.
yeah, this would have been, early 90s, late 80s. And then so somebody gave me I got a tape from my neighbor that was Motley Crue, Girls, 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 and I was like, whoa, this is something I've never heard. And then shortly thereafter, somebody said, well, if you like that, check this out. And they gave me a cassette tape that one side had Slayer, Rain and Blood. No, it was South of Heaven. Slayer, South of Heaven, and the other side was Nevermind the Bullocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. And I fell in love. I was just like, so it was literally the classic punk rock record that get like so many people into punk rock. That was my introduction. And from there I got really into Circle Jerks. And I mean, Circle Jerks were like my favorite band forever. I still really like them. And Subhumans, and then like Minor Threat for sure.
Yeah.
7 Seconds, like most of that stuff. And this was before there was I mean, there might have been a Nirvana here, but they weren't like popular then or anything. If there was later, I remember when Bleach came out, and a lot of my friends were into Bleach, because a lot of my friends that rode skateboards and were into punk rock on the peninsula were into grunge too, but it was kind of, they just started calling it grunge. And Nirvana was in that category, but more so was like Tad, this band here, Tad, and
Tad.
Yeah, so Tad and like Sleep, and obviously Soundgarden was. Pearl Jam was like a later thing coming from some of the other bands. But anyways, I wasn't really a part of that. I got way into like from punk, I got way into Dead Kennedys obviously too, but all of that stuff sort of led to eventually I heard The Cure and Bauhaus and Skinny Puppy and stuff like that, and got really into that. And so during that time in high school is when I met Marty, and we were way into The Cure and Joy Division and Bauhaus and like Jane's Addiction. It was Jane's Addiction and Nine Inch Nails were sort of like the most and the Pixies were sort of like the most popular of all of that kind of thing going on. And so the punk rock sort of took a back seat because nobody was doing straight ahead punk rock. It was more like the punk rock influence in those kind of bands. And then, Nirvana just kind of out of the box came and they changed everything. I would have been in a junior in high school when Nirvana, like Smells Like Teen Spirit, got really popular.
Yes.
And instantly it went from living in a small town, like watching my back as I rode a skateboard and everybody was calling me names and making fun of us from big trucks out the window, to suddenly like being super like, oh, you like this. They all just assumed I loved Pearl Jam and all this other stuff. And out of all those bands that sort of got really popular, it was like Nirvana was always cool. I liked that Bleach record. And then there was Sonic Youth, because they were on tour with Sonic Youth when they got popular. And so people started liking Sonic Youth, and I always liked Sonic Youth, all right. But we were always like, we'd go to school and it was like a cross between wearing like spiked wristbands and stuff and like black eyeliner, or like dyed our hair black and had black fingernails. Like before it was emo, it was goth. And so we were always kind of this goth punk hybrid, and Marty and I would kind of look a little bit goth and a little bit punk all the time. Later that didn't matter, it kind of like all looked similar, but at that time it didn't. And so we never quite fit in with the punks, and we never quite fit in with anybody because we liked it all, and we rode skateboards. And we'd go, when you're young, you'd waffle. We'd waffle back and forth between, especially since we were like, grew up in the church and our parents were Christians, and we'd go to youth group and not fit in either. Right. But we'd basically waffle back and forth between being like straight edge and being like not straight edge, I guess. So it's because one of us would show up at a party and decide we'd have a beer or something, or smoke weed or something, right? And so man. It was kind of that, like, and then we'd go, man, I got off the edge, man, I got to get back on, and like whatever. So, and it was mostly because we loved Minor Threat, probably in the first place.
Sure.
That was why that was thrown in the mix too. So we were always a little strange. And then how 90 Pound Wuss started was me and John Hammelberger and Marty were actually playing music together, and I was playing bass, and we were kind of like we were doing more like Fugazi Jawbox, or trying to do that kind of thing. I don't think we were very good, but we were kind of doing something like that. And then the original bass player of 90 Pound Wuss sort of started coming around, and he had like a Christian like conversion type experience, and so they started playing music with him, and I'm like, let me go. I'll just sing, because Matt was playing bass and wanted to learn how to play bass. And Matt at that time was really into, this was before Dookie came out. Maybe it was before, or maybe it was around the same time, but Matt anyways was really into just more straight ahead punk rock, like that first AFI record, and like FYP, but he also liked crusty stuff like Nausea, and who's like a band from New York that were more, metal, like kind of, he liked all of that stuff. And then there was some bands in Seattle doing some of that kind of stuff. And so he was buying records from Profane Existence and Maximum Rock and Roll, like just reviews. So he got me back into mostly punk rock. And so we started just playing this snotty kind of pop punk, kind of crusty kind of hybrid music. And we did it like sort of, we'd have a Bible study together, and then we'd practice, because we were practicing in a church basement. So that's a lot of the reason why a lot of those lyrics, I just sort of write them on the spot and like write poems and stuff. Some of them, and they were on subjects that we were just talking about or whatever. So it wasn't until later that I felt we could really start experimenting. And the cool thing is I discovered by the end of that first record cycle, and we started working on stuff for the second record, I had become pretty good friends with the Tooth and Nail crowd that lived in Seattle, which was basically Blenderhead and Roadside Monument. Don't Know, which those are all pretty much the same people, but that whole crowd over here. And Jonathan Ford, who also worked at the time, lived in Seattle. He plays an Unwed Sailor. He's the songwriter, not singer. They don't have a singer, but he's the main songwriter, and he plays an Unwed Sailor. That's been his band ever since Roadside broke up, or he left Roadside, I guess. But he was living in Seattle. He worked in the mail order at Tooth and Nail, and he was really into a lot of like, I guess you could call it, back then we kind of called it spazcore, but it was like defined by bands like Charles Bronson and like Antioch Arrow, Mohinder, Angel Hair, which later became the VSS. And from those, like, I guess Drive Like Jehu would have been sort of in that, and Unwound was the sort of Northwest band that was kind of like that. And Frodis would have been the sort of the band from DC that was like that, but all sort of Fugazi influence, kind of angular rock. And some of it was, you know, more metal, some of it less, some of it, but usually it was defined by like odd time signatures and lots of swing. And then sometimes there'd be a lot of blast beats depending on what band was doing it. Later, like the Locust kind of came from that kind of thing or whatever. And, you know, later Blood Brothers and all of that kind of stuff, but they all had those lineage. So I got into that kind of music that was still punk. And that started really influencing my writing process for the second 90 Pound Wuss record when I'd bring a song to the table, which I only wrote a few songs on the first record. On the first record, there was as far as music goes, mostly I just wrote lyrics and helped arrange stuff. But there was a few songs on there that I wrote. And then, but the second record, I was bringing more stuff that was some of the faster, chaotic things on that second record. I brought some of those to the mix because that's kind of what I was listening to. And I had finally discovered that became a lifelong influence was The Birthday Party, which is Nick Cave's band before Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And they were very punk and angular. And somehow I guess I would have discovered them before that, but then I got into them a lot at that time when we were writing that second 90 Pound Wuss record. So that was a huge influence. So those things definitely influenced that band. And that's kind of why there was such a disparity of things going on. Cause I just sort of, I kind of soak in music and what I like, and I start kind of regurgitating things, I guess. So, I mean, most people probably do to an extent, but I wasn't trying to be, we weren't trying to do something necessarily different. We were just like, I like this, and so I'll write this song. And then you write a riff and it sounds similar. And then what if I sped it up or slowed it down or did this? And then you start locking into these things that you're into.
True.
So, yeah.
True. What, how much time are you able to spend, I mean, these days, you know, creating music? What, do you carve out time to create music for yourself?
I am
Like
really
things for Dry
bad at it.
Bones and, you know, that kind of deal?
Mostly Dry Bones was a project that my friend Joe in Portland, he'd send me these tracks, and then I basically yelled over him and wrote lyrics. And then I would sometimes put bass lines down, and sometimes I'd play some, you know, auxiliary percussion or like a tom on them. But mostly it was pretty much he'd just send me stuff and then I'd write to it. So in all honesty, I haven't really written new music in a long, long, long time. Probably, I mean, Suffering in the Hideous Thieves was the last time I did, and our last record I think came out in maybe 2008 or something. So it might have even been 2005. It's been a long time. So I have lots of ideas kicking around, and I have song lyrics. And 90 Pound Wuss started to sort of put stuff together. I should be doing that 100%. I should be setting aside some time. Instead, I kind of wait for the muse, and then the muse never finishes anything. When it comes and you get this inspiration, it never finishes anything. You actually have to push through that. And I'm kind of too, I haven't done that for a long time. I really should. So right now I have like 4 sort of ideas that I started working with Ableton. So I've tracked riffs and I've tried to put like, you know, a drum machine beat or whatever to some stuff. It's weird because I got to learn a new process, because my in Hideous Thieves, I would either write on a piano, or I'd write on a guitar. And then I'd bring the songs and everybody else would kind of play their stuff to them, or I'd have an idea of what I wanted them to play. That was kind of Suffering in the Hideous Thieves was kind of like my band until the last record that we did. Everybody contributed more. And that's not to say during the whole process, there was always songs on a record that somebody else would write. But generally speaking, it was mostly I put it together to like do my thing, because Wrath the Dead Monkeys at the time was me, John, and Doug, who were always fighting and at each other's throats, and somehow would produce this thing that was like we would have never made if it wasn't us 3 together, for sure. And so it was fun, but it was also frustrating. And so I put together Suffering the Hideous Thieves as a project to sort of just do my own thing. And that was probably the most prolific I've ever been with writing songs. I would play music all the time.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, now it's not like that. The guys in 90 Pound Wuss live still 2 hours. We haven't actually gotten together since Furnace Fest. We've talked,
Oh
and
man.
we've sent some demos back and forth. There's about 6 ideas floating around right now, some in various stages that more people have put stuff to. So I'm hoping that that could continue and we could actually do something. But we're all like older, and I mean, I have a grandkid, John has grandkids, the rest of us have kids, and most of them are older, but so we've been in a different life. I mean, you get in that life stage and suddenly your life changes and things don't feel as urgent or as important.
Sure.
And it's also problematic because it's really expensive to live, at least in Seattle. It's super expensive, and I feel like every day I go to work I just have to hustle. So I do a commission-based sales job. I sell flooring and the install of flooring, and oftentimes we have a general contractor's license, so it'll turn into like a bathroom remodel if we're doing tile or something. So I basically sell and project manage, and that takes a lot out of me. So I don't have as much of a discipline this last year. Even me making those few demos has been good. The best was the dry bone stuff, because I had a lot of opportunity at that time to really, what I'd do is I'd go to my friend's house who had Pro Tools in his house, and he had a lot of time then and wasn't billing me, and so we just have fun by taking these Joe tracks and like putting my vocals and doing stuff to them, and that was great. But that opportunity doesn't exist in the same way it does anymore. And so I've been trying to learn how to use Ableton on my own so I can do that again. The one regret I basically have from all the 90 Pound Wuss years is not paying attention in the studio to what was happening and not learning while I was there.
Right.
That's what I should have done. And then I'd be in a better position now to have that. I know the disciplines for creating, and at times I do it, but it's been a few years now that I haven't really fallen into, like waking up and journaling or just like pushing through and finishing something.
Sure.
That's the hard part. It's like when the inspiration comes, it's great because you could write like 5, 6, 7, 10 riffs that you're super stoked on, but then it's getting those, organizing them and putting them together and making something cohesive. That's the hard part. And
Yes.
that's where I don't have the discipline right now. Thanks for asking, because I need to. It's a reminder. Like, I just need to do it.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
To tell
Thanks.
you to do things.
Man, every time I do that, though, like every time I push through and just like set aside an hour or two to do something like that, it's so fulfilling and good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
With regards to, we're also interested in like people starting bands and scenes, you know what I mean? And so like we know how you guys started and we know like the things that you were interested in, but with regards to like starting the band in Seattle and getting started in a scene, was it easy for you guys, or did you find like you were like swamped with millions of other bands, you had to find your way?
We were sort of unique in the fact that we were from the Olympic Peninsula, and so when we were doing shows, we would have to put them on ourselves.
Yeah.
And there was a very small pool of people in it's a small town, Port Angeles, and we would rent halls and do these things ourselves. And our friends were all like creative people too in other bands and stuff. And the thing that sort of got us on Tooth the Nail or whatever was MXPX was basically doing that same thing in Bremerton.
Yes.
And Bremerton's like an hour from Seattle and like an hour from Port Angeles where we live. So it's essentially on the Olympic Peninsula. So we're like basically neighbors, essentially, like the next city over. There's a lot of woods between us. But so we got them to do some shows, and that's sort of how it took on its form to get into the Tooth and Nail scene. There was also some other things like one year after high school. I think it was the same year I graduated, maybe the year after, but somehow this was even before people were, I mean, I think we had email, but there wasn't, cell phones weren't really a thing then that everybody had. And so we somehow somebody put out an ad or something to get people to drive to Cornerstone Festival from Seattle. I answered that, and I ended up caravanning in a like there was two or three VW buses that were full of people, and we all drove to Cornerstone Festival, and all of those people knew the guys in Don't Know and Blenderhead and all of that stuff. So when I got to Cornerstone that year, I met Damian Gerardo, I met Matt Johnson, Ed Kerrigan. I probably met Dave Bazan at that point too. Like
Oh, wow.
I met all those people back then, and I kept in contact with them when I came back, even though I was living farther away. And so when I moved to Seattle, 90 Pound Wuss had already put out our first record, and we're already in that scene. That was but the Tooth and Nail scene and the Christian music scene here in Seattle were total outcasts. It was its own thing that existed here. What I started doing was Roadside was getting shows at this place called the Velvet Elvis Arts Theater, which was an all ages venue. I started volunteering to work there because it was a nonprofit all ages venue. So this gal who worked at Sub Pop was doing all the shows there, and anyways, I ended up volunteering to do the door, to clean up afterwards, all this stuff. So I would go to every show there. And, that was like the first Death Cab for Cutie show was there. Like Modest Mouse used to play there all the time. So I was helping out there, and everybody got to know me, and they weren't so weirded out about the Tooth and Nail thing anymore. And so we started being able to put on some of the shows we wanted to do there. They let me, and my band, and they were always surprised because people would show up, right, that didn't usually come to the shows there. Because we were doing like any band that was on Discord records that came through that wasn't like super huge, which was basically everybody but Jawbox and Fugazi, would come and they'd play at that place. Lungfish played there, whoever, right? So it was kind of that, and up and down the West Coast, everybody would play at the Velvet Elvis Arts Theater. It was the only all ages place for various reasons in Seattle proper to be able to play at the time. And it's because there was this antiquated law in Seattle during those days and all through grunge, which is crazy. That's called the Teen Dance Ordinance. So you couldn't have, in the city of Seattle, you had to have a special insurance to have anyone under the age of 21 gathered for live music. And it cost a lot of money, and you couldn't sell alcohol because there wasn't like, you could have a bar or a wristband if you were over 21 or whatever. They didn't have that. You couldn't do that. It was just nobody under 21 where there's alcohol sold. You can't be there. The exception was like churches and events like that. And so this is what happened later is I was already integrated in that scene. The Velvet Elvis closed down. There was nothing proper in Seattle. And I started early on going to a church here, and they decided that they would put on all ages shows at this venue that they had. And so I just started running it, and all my friends. So the first show was like Blood Brothers and Tight Bros from way back when, and like and it went really well. And so I basically the club was we called it the Paradox. And it was this thing that existed in Seattle. So this whole time though, people were fighting to get this teen dance ordinance repealed. And so by the end, when we stopped doing the Paradox in like early 2000, the church ended up getting a different building and trying to do it without me and doing some other thing. And they did some great shows for a while in this, but it was like a church multi-purpose room, and the teen dance ordinance eventually got repealed. And so there was really no need for what they were doing. It wasn't a community service anymore. And so that was but that time, like we did the first Bright Eyes shows in Seattle. There was so much that happened at that venue. It was a great venue. So essentially I was part of a scene that was kind of outcast, and then just integrated myself into the scene by helping out and doing something with it.
Yeah.
And then I was able to kind of create our own scene through booking a club.
That's cool.
So I would say the first thing you do is find your own way to do shows. If it's
Yeah.
at a house, wherever, just do your own thing. Don't care about anybody. Just do what you want to do. And if you can't get it done in the way that you would ideally like, it doesn't matter. Just do it and find a way to do it. I think during that time was all really highly motivated, and I was very prolific and I was at so many shows all the time, saw so many
Sure.
bands. It's nice to be older now. My kids are older, and I started doing that again. Like in March, I'm going to see Drug Church and Alkaline Trio. The next night,
Cool.
this next night, this band from San Francisco, and then the night after that, I'm going to see Idol. Chelsea Wolf, and then the
Nice.
following week is Idols.
Wow.
It's like crazy. So yeah, after that, that's my music has been the last couple years since COVID. Like I think since the lockdown stopped, I just started
Yeah.
going to shows all the time again, and I feel the energy again like I did when I was younger. I hope it can translate to the creative part of it.
Yeah,
Hasn't yet.
One of these days, man.
Yeah, totally.
But we see that happening too. I mean, the band that Brent and I are in that you came and saw.
Yeah, Made Aware. Yeah,
exactly.
I've listened to both of those EPs.
Oh, thank you
The
so
ones
much.
they're streaming. Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
We appreciate it.
thanks.
We found the same thing. I mean, we're still seeing it. I mean, at the age that we are now, adults, I mean, we're still seeing that same vibrancy here in Birmingham of like people our age or people younger finding places to play, booking their own shows, even if it doesn't seem plausible, like finding a way to put a show on. And even for us, like sometimes we think it'll be easy. Sometimes we think, we'll be able to book a show pretty easily by emailing somebody, but then sometimes we just have to literally set the whole thing up ourselves. And it's still happening. I mean, it happens with all the bands around here, And I think those scenes are still happening in, all pockets of the country.
It's so cool. Like when I was in Birmingham, it felt refreshing to see. It felt like breweries, there was so many of them, and it felt like the breweries and the
Yes,
music scene were like very intertwined in a way
very
that
much.
it's just really cool. I think you guys do have a really great vibe going on down there. I think it's like a secret pocket of music. The two bands that we played with at Trim Tab were both stellar, like
Oh, yes.
excellent.
Yeah.
It
Penny
was
Circus.
Penny Circus, and no, there was three. Day Job too. Day Job
Mhm.
was one of them.
Uh-huh.
Penny Circus, and there was another band that was more like shoegazer. What are they called? They were great too.
Was it
Anyways.
No Culture?
No cult. No, yeah, new. No,
Mm.
maybe it was. That sounds familiar.
Mhm.
No
It may
culture.
have been. It may have been No Culture then. Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, it was for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
Those guys are really great. They're not even from Birmingham.
No.
They're from Coleman.
That's right. That's right.
But they're fantastic as well. And yeah, it's interesting, just like the scene here and just even some of the ties, you were talking about Jonathan Ford, like Unwed Sailor actually they got added onto the Workplay show.
That's right.
And David Swats is actually a good friend of ours who plays guitar in Unwed Sailor
Yeah.
with Jonathan now. And so it's just cool to kind of see like the people that we have admired, like you guys and Roadside Monument, and like actually like you stepping in and playing shows with them and like getting to like do this kind of stuff, which we would have never ever really thought about.
Nope.
Was like kind of sitting down and having these conversations with you guys about like where you've come from, where the music scene, what it was like in your time, all that good stuff. And so it's really cool to see.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think Birmingham has a really great music scene. It was pretty cool. Just like the things that it reinvigorated me. Here it's so like, I mean, this city's so. I used to love it, and it's so turned into bougie, like kind of strip malls. It seems it feels like everything's just like the character that was here in the 90s is completely gone from Seattle. It exists a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's just grown up. So like it's just blew up. So there's so
Right.
many people that have moved here for Microsoft and everything else that they have, freaking Nintendo's here. Google has a big building here. Amazon, especially, that's the big one. So that changed the whole dynamic of the city, that it feels like, I don't know if you've ever been to like San Jose, but it feels like that. There's like all this new build and everything's square and boxy and glassed in. And it just lost all the charm of like rundown brick buildings and Pacific Northwest mildew and moss on everything. It's just not like that anymore. It's too clean and pristine, and everything costs more money. And it was refreshing going to somewhere in the South that felt homely. Like these people are doing something and they don't really seem to give a shit what the rest of the world's doing. They just want to do their thing and like enjoy it and work together to make something. It felt like that to me. It was, and here we're just inviting all these people in to have this big old party this weekend. It was so fun. It was really fun. My two of my kids and my partner came down and they came on Friday, and then Saturday, since most of the stuff in Birmingham was closed that they wanted to do on Sunday. So instead on Saturday, they went to like the Civil Rights Museum and they did
cool.
tours of like, they went on a tour of an old, like a farmhouse, that whatever, cotton production or whatever back in the day. So it had all those historical things around that time. And they just had a great time seeing all that stuff and doing something that wasn't rock music. But I was definitely like, I'd visit Bake Brothers, and then I'd go watch shows all day.
Love it. Love it, dude.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, Jeff, we can't thank you enough for talking with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, come on back sometime, man. Come down and hang out with everybody.
Please.
Yeah, I'd love
Obviously,
to.
you like Birmingham, so.
I do like Birmingham. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, I'll hit you up for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You've always got a place to stay, whether it's with me and Josh or whoever.
Woo-hoo.
So
Thanks.
down, man. Bring the whole family.
Yeah.
Let me know if you guys ever make it up this way. I know touring's hard.
Touring's
you ever
hard.
do-
He has extended family that's in Seattle.
okay.
Yeah. So my wife's father is like one of 12, but they all grew up in Tacoma. So yeah. So I'm up there. I'm actually going to be up there in June. So
hit me up.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll go.
be a
Like I
big bill.
can drive down to Tacoma for sure. There's cool places in Tacoma. Tacoma's great. That's where Botch is from.
I didn't know that.
Snap.
Yeah, Botch is the Tacoma band.
Really? I did not even know that. That's wild.
They're Tacoma hardcore all the way.
That's crazy because I hear stories about how Tacoma used to be back in the day, and it kind of like makes me cringe to think about what was going on.
It was scary. Tacoma, you go to Hilltop and it was threatening. Seattle was never quite like Tacoma was always rougher than Seattle.
Yeah.
Oh man,
That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
Unreal.
100%. And so you know what? Back in the like early 90s, Bremerton was actually pretty rough too. It's not as rough anymore, but Bremerton's like a sailor town, and so I just had to deal with rednecks mostly and on the Olympic Peninsula. It was all logging was the industry out there, and so I just had to get pre-Nirvana. That's the thing, is a lot of people don't realize, and you guys are probably right on that cusp of the age when, I don't know, you must have been in grade school or something when Nirvana came out or something.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
So all of a sudden the whole entire culture went from suddenly it was okay if you had like pink or blue hair and wore Dr. Martens and looked and dressed funny. Suddenly it was okay and nobody like harassed you. But before that, it was constant harassment. Like I just show up anywhere and it was like getting called names and picked on. So Nirvana really did change culture just by releasing that damn song. It's crazy.
So we have Nirvana to thank for 90 Pound Wuss. That's what we're saying.
Maybe. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's go there. Yeah.
Jeff, we're gonna be in touch, man. Thank
Yeah,
you so
man. We'd
much.
love to have you back on
Thanks.
for sure.
Yeah, Brett, hit me up when you come up here.
Oh, he
I
will.
will, brother.
Okay, cool.
Good to
Thanks.
talk to you, man.
You too. Bye.